Who will be the Jazz's star of the future? Find out next on Locked On Jazz.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Jazz. My name is Leif Thulin. I'm excited and honored to have the opportunity to fill in for David Locke on Locked On Jazz. As you guys may know by now, I'm a lifelong Jazz fan who's credentialed NBA draft analyst for Locked On NBA Big Board, attendee of the 2023 and 2024 NBA Draft Combine, Jazz broadcast assistant and statistician the past 4 seasons, lover of college basketball. So don't expect all the geeky numbers of usual to be gone that David brings, but I'll bring a unique perspective as a college hoops fan and someone who works with the Jazz and loves the Jazz dearly to make you as knowledgeable and as possible about your Utah Jazz in this critical juncture of Jazz history where we need a star. Don't have one right now. Can we find one in the draft? And I'll also talk about, of course, the game that just happened between the Jazz and the Pacers. Thanks for making Locked On Jazz your first listen each and every day. Remember, Locked On Jazz is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube at Locked On Jazz, where the best way to help us grow is comment anything below. And today's question is, who would you take it to if the Jazz selects second overall and Cooper Flagg is off the board? And please tell me what you guys think on those, because I'm really excited to hear, is there someone other than the guys that we're going to talk about in terms of Ace Bailey and Cooper Flagg and, of course, Dylan Harper? Is there other guys that you guys may be interested in? Let me know below. The title sponsor today is FanDuel, so thank you to them. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5 and you'll win. And if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. So download the app and head to FanDuel.com to get started. In the first segment, I'll give you my impressions of the Jazz game where they fell to the Pacers in a tight one that, frankly, the Jazz should have won. In the second segment, I'll break down the game of Cooper Flagg with a surprise guest who has some high praise for Cooper Flagg, who appears to be the crown jewel of this year's draft class. And in the final segment, my surprise guest and I will discuss the 2 teammates who appear most likely to go second overall and tell you what is the appeal of each of those guys should the Jazz pick second. Let's dive right in. The Jazz fell 112 to 111, I should say. That would be quite a rout. And that was to an Indiana team that's playing very well, winning 8 of their last 10 games. But it wasn't a great feeling to lose that game. Not great at all, because the Jazz were the better team. And it wasn't the Indiana team that record 8-10, scoring over 120 per game that the Pacers had been playing. That team didn't show up. They didn't show up at all, in fact. Like, they were not very good. So the Jazz and Pacers battled, and once again, the Jazz showed up with some good signs, and especially in the first half where they shot 54% from the field and 44% from 3. You can't complain about that. I generally say, and take this as you wish, the Jazz were the better team today, but found a way to lose, which is frustrating as a Jazz fan, attending that game like I did, and many of you guys did, but also largely the better outcome, which is something we should want as Jazz fans, to have the chance to get Cooper Flagg. The Wizards won. They've won 2 of their last 3. And that means the Jazz have even a better chance, because the Jazz lost a game they should have won. But it still stinks to watch, and you've heard Will Hardy talk about this ad nauseum, and the battle of trying to develop internally while losing games. So the Jazz blew their NBA record setting of this year, 14th game when leading them by more than 10, and the 10th game where they led in the fourth quarter and lost. That's brutal, but we have to remember what the goal is in the long term, and the internal development is there, and we'll discuss that more. So here's how that result happened. And we'll touch on some keys to this ball game we talked about in the prior episode. The Jazz blew an 8-point lead where they were leading by 8, had all the momentum with 5 minutes to go. And in those 5 minutes, in the next 4 minutes, the Jazz only scored 4 points in 4 minutes in crunch time. It's really hard to do because there's a lot of fouls, a lot of free throws, and the Jazz slowed to a crawl, had turnover issues, and didn't generate good shots. So they relinquished their lead, and Tyrese Halliburton, credit to him and the Pacers, he had a big 3 to put them ahead and made some incredible passes to punish the Jazz in their transition defense. So for the everydayers, you may remember yesterday's keys to the game, so let's revisit those. The first key for Utah was playing with pace and being able to push the pace without being sped up and giving the Pacers runouts via turnovers leading to points. Well, the Jazz started well, and by the end of the half, in which the Jazz opened up a big lead going on a 22-2 run in the first quarter, the Pacers began 1-12 from 3, so the Jazz did a good job winning the battle in the paint because they kept the Pacers on the perimeter. But that lead dissipated, as the Jazz were once again forced into many turnovers, 12 in the first half, which is clearly known by Indiana, who began picking up higher, and they recorded 8 steals. And this is a team that averages 8 steals per game. They recorded 8 steals in the first half, which helped propel Indiana into 15 points off turnovers to overcome a putrid shooting start. That's only in the first half. In the final of the game, the box ended with the Jazz with 18 turnovers, which is right on brand, but those led to 26 fast break points and 26 points off of turnovers. Those aren't exactly the same because some of those are live ball and some of those are dead ball turnovers, but 26 in each category. Another key stat I mentioned in yesterday's episode was how frequently Indiana scores from 2-point range, and particularly within the paint. They're excellent at this, one of the best in the NBA. So for a small sample size, Indiana shot 15 of 19 in the paint against the Jazz in the first half, shooting 17 of 22 from 2. That's making a lot of money in the paint. And the Jazz defense, pretty inept in protecting the paint, while Indiana settled for a lot of threes. So the Jazz did make them shoot shots that Indiana typically doesn't take that many of, which is why they typically shoot well from three, shooting 37%. They weren't very good from 3 in this one. In fact, they were very bad. And what I typed at halftime, I have it on my notes. I said, essentially, as I typed this, if the Pacers shoot better from 3, that bodes very poorly in the next half, as the Jazz played well in offense, and the Pacers shot very poorly and were anemic for a 5-minute stretch, only scoring 2 points, and yet only trailed by 4 at half. So let's revisit that. Once the final game, the final box score read, it said the prediction goes correctly in terms of the final. If they had shot better, they would have won, and they did win. But the Pacers only shot 24% from 3 the entire game, and so not much better in the second half. So the turnovers really buoyed the Pacers, who shot bad shots on offense. They weren't very crisp, and they found a way to still win this game, shooting far more threes, less well than they typically do. So the Jazz kept the Pacers afloat with their turnovers. The Jazz allowed the Pacers to finish 33 of 49 from 2, which, as I mentioned, they scored a ton of 2s, but this exceeded what they typically score from 2. Not to mention, they exceeded by a lot the 15% of points that the Pacers score in transition, which is highly ranked in the NBA, and they exceeded those totals, which led to the Jazz losing. Second key I mentioned entering this game is I wanted to keep a keen eye on Isaiah Collier and Keyonte George, the dynamic, to see how they ran the offense and how Keyonte George responded to a bit of a demotion coming off the bench. Well, Keyonte George got extra time because Colin Sexton sprained his ankle, so that may have changed a little things because Keyonte George had a pep in his step. He was engaged, and Collier and George combined for 21 assists. In the first half, they had 13 assists, but they combined for 6 turnovers. In the full game, it was 21 assists between the pair with 8 turnovers, 6 of them Keyonte, 2 from Collier. And many of those led to runouts and kept the Pacers afloat largely in the second quarter, where they whittled the lead down to only 4 at half. The 21 combined assists, massive. That's great, especially when both scoring double digits. And Keyonte was engaged in this one with 8 rebounds, so he had a near triple-double. With all of that said, I would say I remain higher on Collier because the book is out on Keyonte. He struggles as a primary ball handler, and teams often speed him up, and the turnovers begin to accelerate the pace of the game. The Jazz can't stay engaged with teams that are better defensively, and I wouldn't even say the Pacers are one of those teams. However, the third key, if you recall, was actually, before I get there, Collier, by the way, is really dynamic. He is so fast. He's the fastest player on the Jazz since maybe D. Brown or Devin Harris. And those are guys that weren't particularly great at creating for others. Collier's got an innate gift creating for others. So he's very dynamic. What's the next step? It's obvious. It's shooting. Can he punish teams for sagging off him a la Ricky Rubio? Speaking of prior Jazz guards. Clarkson, he does help things when he's on the floor because he spaces. But what Collier does well is he gets to the rim when there are bigs nearby, and he makes the bigs look a lot better getting them lobs. He fed Drew Eubanks before the trade. He's fed Walker Kessler, and he needs to improve getting Lowry some shots. So the third key I mentioned why the Jazz had a chance to win this game, and probably should have, was they dominated the glass. I mentioned that the Pacers are a very poor defensive rebounding team, and the Jazz dominated to the tune of winning the boards 60-37. They doubled up the Pacers at half, 28-14, continued their dominance in the second half. But that only resulted in 17 second chance points as opposed to the 26 points off of turnovers scored by Indiana. So a couple other points. Basically, close game, extra possessions matter. The last point, the bench was excellent, due in part to Colin Sexton spraining his ankle. And that meant Jordan Clarkson was very good. The Jazz bench was very productive, with Keyonte George also scoring very well. And so the Jazz played a good game. They blew it. Is there a moral victory? Up to you to determine. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. It's a beautiful loss in terms of you played as close a game as you can. Well, it still counts the loss column, but it is frustrating to watch a team fall apart and kind of have less belief as a result of losing a game that they should have won. So make of that what you will. We'll talk about more of that, as well as maybe a guy who can catapult these close games into wins coming up in the future. We're going to talk about Cooper Flagg with my guy, James Barlowe, coming up next. By the way, this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What are some of the relationship green flags? We often hear about red flags we should avoid, but what if we focus more on identifying the positive signs in our relationships? Those are the green flags. If you're not sure what they look like, therapy can help you identify them, actively practice them, and embody, and even you can find some way to embody that green flag energy yourself. Whether you're dating, married, building a friendship, or just working on yourself, therapy can help you form relationships that love you back. Therapy can help you develop boundaries and improve your communication skills, both with yourself and with others. It empowers you to set clear expectations and express your needs in relationships. And therapy provides the tools for managing conflict in ways that strengthen your connections rather than break them down and cause fractures in relationships. BetterHelp makes it easy by offering online therapy with over 30,000 licensed therapists to choose from. And if you need to switch therapists, you can do so at no extra cost. So discover your relationship green flags with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. And I also got to tell you about Murdoch Hyundais. And I can give you a true testimonial because right now I am in a Murdoch Hyundai. Murdochs have been in Utah for over 80 years. Hyundai's the best bang for your buck. It's got safety features, bells, whistles, and all. When I change lanes, the little camera pops up and shows me the lane as I change. It's got everything you could want. It tells you the speed you're going when you are turning. Everything, it has everything and more. The SUV lineup, the Kona, the Tucson, that's the car I'm in, and I couldn't recommend it more highly to you guys. The Santa Fe, the Palisade, all in stock and all are updated on what's in stock at the site you go to. The Ioniq 5 is also named the Motor Trend SUV of the Year by Motor Trend, and the new Ioniq 6 is even better. Looks like a Porsche and just won World Car of the Year. There are 3 locations, Linden, Murray, and Logan, and I can personally tell you the Murray location is excellent. And they even recognized me one of the times, said, "Hey, are you Leif from Locked on Jazz?" And I was thrilled to hear that. So couldn't recommend them highly enough. Go down to Murdoch Hyundai and get yourself a Hyundai. And now, without further ado, I bring in my guy, James Barlowe, who I work with on Locked On NBA Big Board, to talk about Cooper Flagg, Ron Harper's son, Dylan Harper. So, Jazz fans, you can forgive the past if you get Dylan Harper or Ace Haley. So, welcome back to Locked On Jazz. The Jazz need a star, and can they get one this draft? We talked so much last year about, the Jazz are picking 10th. Is there a star to be had? We really liked Stephon Castley rose up the draft, and now he was considered untouchable in a trade window when Luka Doncic wasn't untouchable. So maybe James and I know what we're talking about, maybe not, but we do agree Cooper Flagg's the real deal. In fact, I got a statistic for you guys. Cooper Flagg's 18 years old, and in my opinion, the best player in college basketball already, and not just the most enticing prospect. Only 3 freshmen have won Player of the Year. That's AD, Zion, and KD. Quite a trio to be compared with. So he's the real deal. Averages 20, 8, 4 assists, 1.5 blocks, 1.5 steals, 32 minutes. But you have a Hall of Famer that I didn't mention in those Hall of Fame caliber guys that you think Cooper Flagg resembles. Tell me who it is and sell the Jazz fans on what they could get in Cooper Flagg.
All right, so when I watched Cooper Flagg, initially I thought he was a playmaking power forward. Power forward meaning play finisher, not necessarily a play starter. But to my pleasant surprise, I think he is a play starter in a few years, playmaking wing. When I see the defense, when I see the combination of skill and bully ball and finesse, and the handle needs to improve, obviously, but just filling up the box scores with defense and offense and just affecting winning, I see light version of Kawhi Leonard. And I've even gone on Twitter to call him the White Claw. So I'm a big fan of Cooper Flagg. I am buying him. I really think that he is going to be a wing in the NBA. And I understand the NBA 3 and 4 aren't what they used to be. This isn't the Jermaine O'Neal, Dirk Nowitzki era of power forwards. But I feel like he is going to be an initiator because he can pass. And I feel like the handle is going to be better, and he is going to be really, really, really good. He is somebody you need to prepare yourself for so you get the opportunity to draft him.
Yeah, I think Cooper Flagg came in with a lot of buzz, particularly because of what he did at training with the Olympics, playing against the team that won gold. But I almost feel like he was knocked for a lack of a natural innate scoring mentality and ability. He wasn't the prototypical, oh my goodness, this guy's going to score 30. Like, that wasn't the appeal. But he's scoring 20 points, 8 rebounds on what could be the best team in the nation. And since turning 18, he's averaging about 24 per game. And in AP top 25 matchups, he's averaging 23 and 11. So in all the big games, he is the real deal. Now, the other thing I want to point out is maybe he's not a great shooter. Well, he's shooting over 80% from the free throw line and 35% from three. And when he puts the ball on the floor and shoots off mid-range jump shots or creates rhythm for himself, it looks beautiful. The form has gotten significantly better as opposed to kind of that higher release that I know Larry Bird was a great shooter, but I don't think you teach many to shoot like Larry Bird. And it looks similar to that, and it's become more repeatable and maybe a little more standardized and with better results. So while he may not be a natural scorer of the ilk of Ace Bailey or maybe some of the guys we've talked about in recent years, Brandon Miller coming to mind in terms of college basketball, I think his sheer productivity is impossible to ignore. Not to mention, he's absolutely tenacious. Gordy Chiesa, who I reference often, for those of you who don't know, coached 20 years under Jerry Sloan. He compared him to Andre Karolinko, who he said he was there when he was drafted, and Andre Karolinko had all the tools to be one of the best defenders ever. He said defensively it reminds me of Andre Karolinko, and offensively there's so much more. And then he said Karolinko, if he played today, would be a problem. So many have likened him to other Hall of Famers like Scottie Pippen. There are plenty. I heard one today, and this is a surprise to you about Cooper Flagg, and then we'll talk about the nitty-gritty of what he does well. But I heard someone say that he reminded them of Grant Hill. Little different in terms of their impact, but Grant Hill, for those of you who don't know, is probably one of the biggest what-ifs of NBA basketball. He was a first-team All-NBA member multiple times early in his career, came out, was considered the LeBron before the LeBron, a point forward. And that's where the comparison, I think, has some legs. Because I believe Cooper Flagg, whereas he may not be the guy who is your number one scorer in a way that Kevin Durant is, because no one is. I think he can be your number one scorer because he draws so much attention with his ability to go downhill. He dunks on people. He goes to the free throw line 7 times a game. He's able to spin into the middle. And when you have better spacing than what Duke has, where they employ a few big guys that clog the paint, a few guys that have a tendency to slash, Cooper Flagg is going to excel even more getting down to the paint, creating for others. And he's already averaging 4 assists per game in collegiate basketball. So I think there is some teeth to this. I think he's a better defender than Grant Hill was. I don't think he's quite as polished offensively, especially compared to their era as Grant Hill was. But I'll defer to you on this one because I didn't watch Grant Hill in college. I was not born yet.
Leif thinks I'm an old man. I remember Grant Hill more so in Detroit, and I remember he used to give Scottie Pippen just fits because he had the size, he had the athleticism, and he had enough off the dribble where, you know, back in those heavy isolation days, if you clear out a side to him, he's going to hit you in the right to left and get to the basket. But like you said, Cooper Flagg, I mean, he's amazing. He's been better than advertised. And in ACC play, he's getting to the line 8 times a game. He's averaging almost 5 assists. And again, it may not look like Kevin Durant, but he's definitely a force on offense. And that's why I kind of liken it to like a Kawhi Leonard, where sometimes it's just going to be bully ball and sometimes it's going to be finesse. Well, at 18 in old college basketball setting, he's been able to play pure bully ball where you switch a small on him, he's going to post up. And there are plays where he puts the ball on the ground and you see like some quick twitch ability and his ability to get low, get to the basket in one dribble and dunk. Like, I just see Kawhi Leonard there. And again, if the handle catches up, I obviously the jumper is way ahead of schedule, but he has a ton of talent, and I think he is clearly the number one pick in this draft.
Yeah, I think he's clearly the number one pick in this draft. And the thing that you can't mention enough with him is he has every intangible that leads to winning. My friend who's a diehard Duke fan once said, it looks like Greg Popovich has been coaching him since the age of 9, because every play at the end of it, when Cooper Flagg has the ball, the decision that he makes it leads to the maximized outcome. Whether he scores a layup or he kicks out for a 3 on defense, if he switches, he blocks the ball, he steals it. Everything he does leads to a positive outcome, and he plays with just unbridled fire that you can't teach for a guy who's been a blue chip recruit, and everyone has known he's going to be the number one pick. And then there's the question, does he have the capacity to be a number one guy in the NBA? I think, like you said, we all thought he was going to be the number one pick, and there was still the question, and he somehow he's been better than the expectation unanimously. Not one person be like, I don't feel like he's reached that. I think he's been better than those expectations. What he's done has led to winning, and on a team that is filled with veterans in Duke and it has true national championship aspirations. They all defer to him. And in the previous years when Duke has had guys that have gone number one, there hasn't been a clear deference, including Zion Williamson, who won the Player of the Year. RJ Barrett shot more shots and had more points in totality than Zion Williamson. Jason Tatum, who's excellent right now, he was not the number one scorer on his team. Brandon Ingram was, but only narrowly, and I don't think was the best player on his Duke team. So it's not necessarily a given. Paolo Banchero was the number one pick, and I think Coach K, if he gave an interview about how Cooper was more similar in force to Zion than Paolo, because Zion in college was more dominant than Paolo was, even though they were both number one picks. So with all that said, I think you're getting a player that is an ultimate winner, competitor, has positional size, can play the point guard or a secondary ball handler, and someone that's jump shot is the swing skill, and it's rapidly ascending in value. So I think Cooper Flagg, that's the crown jewel. Coming up next, we're going to talk about some nice consolation prizes. You can't necessarily be thrilled about not getting Cooper Flagg after all we said, but I don't think he's the only guy with all NBA potential in this draft. So we'll talk about that coming up next. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that, you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl. That's icing on the cake. It's already a great day. Make it even better. Download the app and head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. All righty. Welcome back to Locked On Jazz. I'm Leif Thulin, joined by James Barlowe of Locked On NBA Big Board. He compared Cooper Flagg to Kawhi Leonard, and I don't think that's outrageous whatsoever. And so if you're missing out on that guy, what's next? Many people believe it's Ace Bailey or Dylan Harper. Ironically, they both reside within Piscataway. Not necessarily the team that you'd think. They're not very good, so see them now because I don't think they're going to make the tournament. But it's not because they're not excellent. So I'm going to have a simple question for you. Who do you have ranked higher between Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, and why?
I am pro Dylan Harper because the combination of size and finishing ability is everything you would want in today's NBA. And you see guys like, man, it even hurts to say his name, man. Luka. He didn't play for. I'm based out of Dallas for anybody who has never heard him. But it hurts to say Luka right now. But you see jumbo playmaker, point guard Luka. You see jumbo playmaker point guard Cade Cunningham. You see even the old version jumbo point guard James Harden. And then you see whatever position you think Shai Gilgeous is, he's a matchup nightmare at 6'5", 6'6". Will Dylan Harper become that level of player? It will have to wait and see. But with his unique ability to get to his left hand, he's one of the better finishers in the paint in college basketball. Jump shot did make some strides. He just has a ton of talent. And I think he is a great athlete, not in the sense of like Anthony Edwards, you're going to get posterizing dunks, but he's a great athlete in terms of like body control. Think like Kyrie Irving, who has just incredible core strength, who can get to both sides of the paint, or he can get to both sides of the rim from either side of the paint. Like that's the kind of athleticism I see with Dylan Harper, and he's 6'5", 6'6". The playmaking he isn't a dynamic playmaker, but I think with NBA spacing, he's going to be able to wreak havoc and make easy reads because he's 6'6", and he is a very good athlete and he's a very good finisher.
So that's interesting because you and I often see things similarly. And coming into the year, I was pro Ace Bailey. Harper, to me, didn't shoot well. He didn't look as comfortable in pick and roll in the high school game. It just looked like, hey, I'm bigger, stronger, faster. I'm not making the reads. I'm just going to predetermine what I'm going to do. And if you can stop it, kudos to you. So I was all the way in on Ace Bailey's shooting and touch combination that, every tall, slender guy is going to get compared to Kevin Durant. No one's Kevin Durant. No one's got that innate coordination, quick twitch, great shooting, ability to handle, everything in between. Is he closer to Brandon Ingram? Probably than Kevin Durant, but I think he's better than Brandon Ingram in his potential. And I even have said before that Ace Bailey, if you were to take the 100th percentile outcome but for him and Cooper Flagg, it could look more like Tracy McGrady versus Scottie Pippen. And you'd take Tracy McGrady because he's that gifted a scorer. But I think Flagg's differentiate himself. And while the season started, I was all in on Dylan Harper. I was like, I think I'm wrong. I went on here for those of you who listen every day, the everydayers. I came on with David and I said, I typically take potential. I take the higher outcome, and I was all in on Ace Bailey. But Dylan Harper has been better by so much it's hard to deny. So when they've both been healthy, it's been Dylan Harper's show, and Dylan Harper is the better player. And you said a name that I think is the best comparison for Dylan Harper. It's Cade Cunningham to me. I think he's Cade Cunningham. He's not necessarily quick, but his size, strength combination, deceleration ability to get in the paint, have you on his hips, score, create for others. And this is on a team but that aside from Ace Bailey is completely inept. They have zero talent supporting, zero shooting, and yet he gets the paint at will. So I say all that to say Ace Bailey may have the higher ceiling, but the guy I feel more comfortable drafting and giving the keys to my franchise is Dylan Harper. What could Jazz fans be expecting? And I'm not saying give them a comparison, but what's the upside you see for both these guys? Take me through what Jazz fans could expect. Should Cooper Flagg be gone? Why should they not hang their heads? And what should they believe about that second pick? Should the Jazz end up at second, where they right now sit after losing, and the Wizards have won a few, so maybe we can believe that we're going to get the top odds.
Well, again, with Dylan Harper, you're getting a large playmaking point guard who is really tough to keep out of the paint. And he routinely splits pick and rolls at the college level. In the college level, Leif, you're the college guru. You're not going to get a lot of drop coverage, just a lot of blitzing. And he figured the blitz out very soon, which allowed him to get to the basket and finish at a very high rate. Now, I don't imagine he'll get a lot of those blitzes, because if there is one thing he doesn't do as well as finishing, it's shooting off the dribble. Now, again, he's gotten better, but he is 6'6", 6'5", but he has a bit of a lower release, and that's going to have to be probably an adjustment. But like I mentioned in the comparison, but Cade Cunningham doesn't have the highest release either. And Cade has been on a tear. He's clearly an all-star this year. He's helped turn around that Detroit franchise. But if you are a believer in Ace Bailey, you're talking about 6'10", lights out shooter, tough shot maker. He just has stuff that even at six, like he has stuff that we haven't seen from freshmen in a very long time, as far as just ability to just make tough jump shots. Now he is a bit further behind, in terms of physicality when you compare him to Cooper or even to Dylan Harper. Ace is a younger freshman. He could potentially just be an older senior in high school, but the tools are there. I have him third. I am concerned about just overall his playing style and his playmaking, but in the right situation, you can improve those things. But he has a lot of talent, and it's almost like if he can see the rim, you feel like he's gonna make it. Like he had a tough night against who they just played. They just lost to Michigan. He shot terribly, but if you go back and rewatch the misses, like every shot was basically on target. Like he's a very dynamic scorer of the basketball.
I mean, the ball touches his hand, and he doesn't even need to dribble. He's kind of in the phone booth type of score right now, which concerns me in terms of the lack of separation. But that said, if he becomes the better athlete, we believe, because while Cooper was 17 to start the year and everyone talked about that, his body is more mature than Ace Bailey's. Ace Bailey doesn't create much space, but he had 37 points against a stout Northwestern defense. And he started the game 9 to 10 from the floor with 24 points, finished 13 to 20 with 37, and did so from mostly mid-range jump shots or threes on a team that lacked Dylan Harper that day. So he had every bit of the offense guarding him. He was super efficient. So on his best days, he's dynamic to a point I don't think anyone can match the shot making and scoring in this draft. But on the worst days, you can take him away with physicality, and that's why I like the sheer production of both Flagg and Harper slightly more than Bailey. But as David Locke pointed out with his skepticism when I said I'd take a 6'5 guard over a 6'10 wing who shoots the heck out of the ball, there's a real argument that archetype is what wins in the NBA today, and I will not dispute that. Let me ask a question here. If you were to say, hey, Ace Bailey or Dylan Harper goes to the Utah Jazz, what could Jazz fans expect in their rookie contract? So the first 4 years, is there a way that Jazz fans can feel confident, yeah, this is the guy to build around? Is there that belief, or is it just Cooper Flagg as the lone guy that is, yeah, you build your franchise around him?
Well, with either of the Rutgers guys, you're getting somebody that you absolutely build around. But at the same time, Jazz fans, I think you should temper expectations, because ultimately, even if these guys are really, really good out the gate, you still want to be really, really, you still want to be in the position to draft well in 2026. You guys are in Utah. You know it's down the road in BYU with AJ DeBansa, but there are other guys as well. So, again, could they ultimately be all-stars, franchise players? Yes, but there is going to take time. And I feel like in a situation for like Ace Bailey in particular, if he ends up in Utah, it's going to be it's like how it is now for him. When everything is going well, you're like, man, this kid is unbelievable. He is lighting it up, tough shot making. Like, I see all the potential in the world, but he tends to have lower lows because he's not a playmaker. And again, he lacks a lot of physicality, and even to the sense where I don't necessarily want to just blame it on him not being as physically developed, but he does kind of struggle with just taking angles and generating paint touches for himself. But it's something that he has improved on as the season has gone on. He's just a little further behind your Dylan Harpers and your Cooper Flaggs. But again, tremendous, tremendous talent. And like you mentioned in your first segment, you pair an Ace Bailey with a Isaiah Collier. Well, I mean, that makes Ace Bailey's job that much easier because he's going to have a point guard that's going to be able to find him every single trip down the court.
Well, you heard it here. There's a luxury of riches in this draft class. You're going to hear more from me about that as this season progresses and into draft season. Thank you guys for listening. By the way, your favorite podcast now is a newsletter. So introducing Locked On Jazz, the daily newsletter, one-stop ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. That's lockedondaily.com. And start your day with all the new free Locked On Jazz newsletter and everything within it. Also, thank you guys for listening. Always a pleasure to talk with you guys. Thanks for making Locked On Jazz your first listen. With your second listen, tune in to Locked On NBA Big Board and hear James and Raphael and myself talk about some of these prospects. So you're going to find out that it's not just these three guys that factor into the decisions. Maybe it can be as simple as the Jazz get Cooper Flagg, who you heard right here, number one for us, but there's plenty of options. There's not a shortage whatsoever. There's plenty of options, and hopefully the Jazz can get a shining star to propel the franchise as they've had in years past with answers like Donovan Mitchell and, of course, the days of Darren Williams, Stockton Malone. So thank you guys for listening. Always a pleasure to be on with Locked On Jazz. Coming up next, David Locke will be back and talking to you guys more about the Jazz as they head into the All-Star break. Thank you guys for listening.